Good morning. Today I want to go over politics in early Oklahoma with you. Our essential question today is, how did political decisions affect the lives of Oklahomans in the early 1900s? We're going to see some of the many decisions that were made during that time. Terms that we need to know: taxes are something that we all have to pay in order to pay for things like roads and hospitals and schools. Any kind of public infrastructure is paid for with our taxes. So there's taxes are important to pay, and in Oklahoma we will see one of the first income taxes in the nation. It is not until almost a decade later that the United States will pass a federal income tax law. Excuse my phone today. It's not turned off, I guess. Ordinance is, we have city ordinances going on right now in relation to mask mandates. And so if you're in Oklahoma City or in the city of Edmond right now or Tulsa, you are required to wear a mask anytime you are in public. Those are city ordinances. Cooperative is where a group works together in order to form an industry. So if you live out in the middle of nowhere, your electricity may not be coming directly from OG&E. There may be a cooperative group, a rural group that works, and they probably have to buy the electricity from OG&E, but OG&E doesn't directly provide it. Therefore, oftentimes things are more expensive when they're provided through a cooperative. Grandfather clause, we're going to talk more about next week, but basically it's that if your grandfather, if your family member could not vote in 1866, then you can't qualify to vote. And so we know that most African Americans in 1866 would not have qualified to vote. Gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is where political boundaries are set in order to favor one party over another. Every 10 years, a census is taken, and the federal government comes back and says, okay, Texas, you grew by 10%, and Oklahoma, you decreased by 10%. Therefore, Oklahoma, instead of having 5 members of the House of Representatives, you're only going to have 4 next time. I hope that doesn't happen to us, but it did. In 2000, it happened, and we used to have 6, so we'll see. But when they do that, they have to redistrict the lines. They have to redraw them. And so if you know that one area of the state is highly Democratic, then if you're drawing the lines and you want them to favor the Republican Party, you're going to take and divide that, say it's the city of Tulsa. You're going to divide that one city into 4 areas or 3 areas or whatever in order to make it where the Democrats don't have a stronghold in that area, where they, well, as it is now, the eastern part of the state is almost all under the control of, or the representative is Mark Wayne Mullins, except for the city of Tulsa, because it's based on population. So the city of Tulsa has a large population right there together. So that entire population has its own representative, whereas the next representative represents the entire eastern side of the state. So if you want to say they were 2 differing political groups, then you would divide that area of Tulsa up into 2, maybe 3 different groups, and to where the opposite party would have a better chance of controlling and not allowing the voice of that dominant group in that one area to be heard. it gets its name from the person who coined it back in the early 1800s. There's some famous cartoons about it being done in, I believe, in, the state just left my mind. Anyway, up in one of the northeastern states, Massachusetts is the one I'm thinking of. And it, they drew boundaries that were all scraggly and went around just to make sure that areas that were heavily one thing or the other were divided up in order to favor the opposite party. And lastly, we have impeachment. And impeachment, we know, is to have a trial basically against a political official, elected political official, in the effort to remove them from office. Just because you're impeached does not mean you're removed from office. In federal situation, you can be impeached by the House of Representatives, and then it goes to the Senate for a vote. Just a little trivia for you. We have had 3 presidents now impeached. The first one is Andrew Johnson, who was the president to follow Lincoln. Lincoln had chose him as a Southern Democrat who was loyal to the Union in hopes that he would bring the Union back in. Would bring the Confederacy back into the Union, would help ease that tension. But nobody knew Lincoln was going to die. So when Lincoln died, then that put somebody in charge that they didn't expect and didn't want. And so the Republican-controlled Congress did things to specifically try and get them to get him in trouble. And they knew that he would go against them on certain things, so they made laws that he would go against, and eventually they impeached him. It went to the Senate, and he was saved in the Senate by 1 or 2 votes. I haven't studied that in a couple of years, but just very minimal amount of votes that saved him from actually being removed from office. The second time that most people think of is with Nixon, but Nixon was never brought up on impeachment charges. He would have most likely been removed from office for his discretions because they were actually crimes against the country. But he resigned instead, and that was in 1974, and he resigned under the pressure in the situation of Watergate, and much else was going on in his presidency. You'll get to learn about when you take U.S. history. And then in 1998, I believe, we have the impeachment trial of President Bill Clinton, and President Clinton was impeached for lying under oath, which is a crime. The problem was that he lied about a personal matter, not about things that would endanger the nation. And so, yes, he was impeached by the House, but the Senate did not vote to remove him. And then our current president, President Trump, was impeached for quid pro quo, like you do this and I'll do this for you, with a phone call to the Ukraine. The whole thing was kind of a mess because the White House didn't allow any testimony to be done. And so when it gets to the Senate was completely Republican controlled, and they would refuse to hear any testimony at all. And they basically have a vote of 52-48. By the way, we'll get to the 1920s in here, and in Oklahoma, we impeached several governors. The progressive movement influenced the first actions of our legislature. This is dealing with child labor, worker safety, public health, sanitation, convict labor, and other labor issues. The progressive movement was swiftly moving across the country, and this new state of Oklahoma was a great place to trying out all these new acts, laws, and activities. and you'll learn a lot more about progressive era in U.S. history as well. County and local governments were set up along with school districts and funding mechanisms for them. There continue to be today some funding that comes from land holdings, and every school district is entitled to a certain amount of land holdings that the income of that land comes directly to the schools. Obviously, it's not enough to pay for our schools, and so our schools are funded primarily off of property taxes today. Income and property taxes were authorized as well as taxes on business and industry. A banking system was established to ensure deposits. And as far as higher education, we see the University of Oklahoma, University of Central Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State University all created or named as state institutions. Most of them were already in existence. I guess all of them were at this point. Oklahoma State was originally called Oklahoma A&M, Oklahoma State A&M. Private colleges existed such as Epworth in Oklahoma City, which was Oklahoma City University, and Henry Kendall College became Tulsa University, both of which continue to be private universities today. I believe Tulsa is run by the Presbyterians and Oklahoma City is run by the Methodists. In 1909, the state established 3 normal schools to train teachers. These are located at East Central State University down in, it used to be college, but down in Durant. And then you have Northeastern State. And I'm not 100% sure what the third school is. I actually thought it was Central State University, which is the University of Central Oklahoma. Additional schools were created for the study of mining, industry, and agriculture. Today, when you go to college, most people don't major in mining, but it was important at the time, all of these different degrees. And if you go to Oklahoma State University, you can major in agriculture, and you can major in engineering at most of our universities, and all of these things that will bring you into the industry field. Okay, I'm going to skip this one because we're going to come back to legal discrimination next week. In 1907, the Democrats controlled political parties in the state of Oklahoma. Socialist Party had support and was made of unionists, miners, and immigrants and intellectuals. If you look at that Socialist Party, it is made up of a wide variety of people. Many blamed their poverty on wealthy and saw the Socialist Party as the answer to their problems. Voters supported the breakup of large holdings, land holdings, and government support for farmers and cooperatives. Republicans began to gain some power in the state, and they blamed this on the black voter. And this is important because you remember that we have all black towns in the beginning of our state. And these all black towns, they're going to look at and say, well, they're voting primarily Republican, which is a change away from the strongly held Democrat Party. Oklahoma will be a Democratic state, a Democrat state for, they called them Yellow Dog Democrats, for decades. But I want you to think about something. Today, if we look at African Americans today, who do they typically side with, the Republicans or the Democrats? In the 1860s, the Democrats were the ones leading the Civil War in support of slavery. Okay, and so in the early 1900s, the Democrats will also start leaning more towards this progressive movement and the growth of some socialism activities. But the change in party relationship towards minority groups does not really happen until the 1960s with John Kennedy. So in these early years of our state, people are going to be sticking with the minorities are going to stick with the Republican Party. And it isn't until, once again, the 1960s with John Kennedy that we see the flip-flop of the parties. And it's at that point that the Democrats no longer represent Southern ideologies, okay? A.C. Hamlin was the first Black representative in 1910. And then new laws would be created to limit Black voting power, including a grandfather clause that said a person could not vote unless they descended from a person who could vote in 1866 or pass a written test. We'll talk more about those laws next week. We talked a bit about Kate Barnard on Monday, but just know she's the first woman elected to state office, and she worked to make Oklahoma better. McAlester becomes the site of the first state penitentiary. If you visit McAlester today, there's actually 3 different state prisons located there in that area, all at differing levels. But Big Mac, which is the original prison there, is considered the high level big lockdown prison. It is where death row is contained here in Oklahoma. And if you aren't aware, yes, we do execute people here in Oklahoma. All right, moving a capital. Guthrie was made the capital according to the Organic Act, but the Democrats did not like that there was such a strong Republican influence in that area. So the voters in 1910 vote to move the capital to Oklahoma City, but there was a lot of, it wasn't quite clear that that was going to be legal. So the governor, at the stroke of midnight, actually steals the state seal and takes it to Oklahoma City and sets up the government in a hotel in downtown Oklahoma City. There was no Capitol building. There were, this was kind of a sneak in the night to get the Capitol moved to Oklahoma City. All right, I'm going to let you read through these next 2 governors, and I hope you have a great day. Talk to you later.